welcome to Monday Night Football. We are returning from our winter break, and we are returning as never before in a couple of different ways. Joining me in the studio today is no one. I'm completely on my own due to logistical reasons. So what we're going to do, rather than talk any football at all, I'm just going to tell you some short stories and unveil some poems that I've been writing over the winter break and do a little bit of soul searching on it. Nah, I'm only joking. Scott is on the phone. We're going to do Hearts coverage first based on the Edinburgh Derby, the transfer window so far, and then we will get Craig on the line later in the show to discuss the Hibs side of the Derby and their transfer dealings so far. So I am going to try to bring Scott on air right now. Scott, are you there?
Hi there, Sam. I certainly am. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thanks.
Good. So I mentioned there that it was a different show, a show that we had never done before. First and foremost because I'm in the studio on my own and it's a little bit eerie and I'm a little bit frightened here right now. There were some wannabe hooligans hanging about outside and I was a wee bit frightened without you to protect me, mate. But
well, that is tremendous.
How dare you? But it's also different because Hearts won a derby, mate. And we started this show,
was it 2 or 3 weeks after our last victory back in 2014?
In 2014, so a number of years ago. And we'd never got to talk about that derby because it had already gone. And since then has been this unbeaten run that we've all heard so much about over the last few weeks in particular. That unbeaten run is now over. First and foremost, for you personally, how does it feel to be the triumphant fan on a derby Monday Night Football?
I think there's probably a sense of relief more so than anything else. I think one of the things that probably wasn't really touched on prior to or post-match was the fact that this match was, if we're being honest here, this match probably meant a lot more to Hearts as a club and to its supporters than it did for Hibs. I think Hibs fans can afford to probably lick their wounds. The players can as well, and maybe still, see the season in a positive light, given it's their first one back up and being promoted, and they could still get a top 4 spot and possibly a European place. I think if Hearts had lost that game yesterday, or even if it had went into another replay, it would have really slowed down that momentum that had been building over the last 2 or 3 months, particularly since we went back to Tynecastle Park. So the kind of first bit is joy, naturally getting a late goal and getting a late winner. But then naturally over the last 24 hours, it has been more of a case of just being relieved that we can now build on this and hopefully sort of take this further forward.
Okay, well, let's say we're obviously going to cover the game in infinite detail before we sort of double back and cover a little bit of the goings on in the last couple of weeks while we've been away for a well-earned winter break along with the players. So let's go, as we normally do with these big games, we'll sort of cover your feelings as a supporter a wee bit in the lead up to the game before we then actually walk through the events of the game and get your opinion on how it all played out. So we've got a Monday Night Football group chat. You're always pretty active in it. You were very active on Saturday night and Sunday morning with your suggestions of Hearts' team and how exactly you thought we would line up. Now, despite absolutely botching the way you laid the formation out in the chat, so I thought you were playing Suter at right back and Randall at right midfield, you did actually get the team spot on.
All I would say is I was just basically doing a copy and paste job from my inside source, so you can blame me for the formation.
Fair enough. Right, so I thought that you had an inside track purely in terms of your own know-how and tactical savvy, but it actually turns out you've got a leak. Right.
Yes.
But so what was, when you initially found out that was the team then, what was your reaction?
Well, I can't remember if I put this on the group chat, but I was, as the days kept on going on, and obviously the contrasting sort of feelings that were coming and emanating from both camps due to the transfer activity, more so with Hibs outgoings and then Hearts incomings, there just seemed to be that little bit of a shift that you sometimes feel among supporters, even if it's just sort of online and sort of, looking at what the vocal minority are saying. You could just tell that there was a little bit of a change in attitude amongst both sets of fans, and I felt confident in a 2-0 win going into the game, just purely after seeing the way I felt that we were going to set up. I thought that Hibs under Lennon, what Hibs have been quite good at doing is becoming quite stodgy away from home and thinking that if they could get a replay, they'd be quite happy with that. As Lennon stated before on many occasions, rightly so, the pitch does cut up quite easily. Even if it looks quite good prior to the match, it cuts up fairly early on. And I think that Hibs probably felt as if it was going to be a battle, and the best way sort of dealing with that would be to just see the game out and try and just, play the conditions and then try and take us back to Easter Road. But I felt that we were going to have an extra gear up front with Naismith coming in and hopefully potentially Mitchell as well, who's a bit of an unknown quality. But you felt as if there was maybe going to be a bit of urgency within the team with a bit more added pace and dynamism. So I felt confident going in, more confident than I have felt probably at any stage of the last sort of 2 or 3 years. So yeah, definitely buoyant. I mean, there was obviously the pre-match nerves as you always get, but generally more confident now than I have been for a while.
Okay, now we'll cover the personnel more as we go on for obvious reasons, and we will labour the point of transfer business when we wrap up the call with yourself before we move on to Craig. But in terms of the shape and the system, one point that I think surprised a few, myself included, while it seemed entirely logical for to get the best out of the players available to Craig Levein to change the system to go to 3 at the back for this one particular game, one of the reasons that there had been a bit of a shift in mentality, one of the changes in Hearts over the last few months has been the defensive solidity and the fact they were coming in off the back of 6 clean sheets. Yes, there was the Ollie Shaw happening, but unfortunately Hibs fans, it didn't count. So we have to say statistically off the back of 6 clean sheets, which is an incredibly impressive defensive record. Were you surprised that Craig Levein was brave enough to mess with that back 4 that had got those clean sheets and move to a back 3, bringing Aaron Hughes in alongside Berra and Suter?
Probably not for 2 reasons. I think firstly, that to me seems like the way I feel like Hearts have been wanting to approach these types of matches, not only under Craig Levein, but I also felt like if we had the right personnel and, a bit more luck with injuries and suspensions, we would have played 3 at the back more under Cathro and Robbie Nielsen as well. So I felt, especially when we signed Dimitri Mitchell just over a week ago, that he was going to be signed primarily probably more as a wing back than a left back. So I did feel that if we could keep Hughes fit, that would be something we would be looking at. Now, whether we can afford to do this for the rest of the season, it remains to be seen, purely because we've got a couple of weeks now where we've got 2 games a week. It's going to be hard to see whether we're going to be able to fit Hughes in, and we don't really have a lot of other replacements available. Maybe Daniel Burr will get more of a run in the team, but I wasn't surprised to see us start that way yesterday.
Okay, well, we'll double back on that a wee bit before we let you go when we preview the next couple of games and we can talk about a bit of squad rotation. But let's focus then on the way the game played out on Sunday. I thought we spoke a lot after the Celtic game, which now is obviously the template for Hearts, for positive performances of this season. That Celtic game, Hearts exploded out of the blocks. They set the tone, they got Tynecastle on side, and it was a different Hearts that we saw that day. It wasn't quite that start, but there was a conscious effort on Hearts' side to show that they were up for the battle and that it was no going to be one of those derbies that passed them by and where they allowed themselves to be dominated. That in particular manifested itself with a nice wee passing move that led to Stevie Naismith's chance in sort of the 3rd or 4th minute. What were your thoughts on, firstly, how Hearts imposed themselves on the game, but secondly, on that chance? Did you fear that, having not got their noses in front, that may have been something that we looked back on and rued?
It was initially, but just purely because it reminded me so much about the first 5 minutes of last year's cup game at Tynecastle, where Goncalves is through 1-on-1 and, hits the shot straight at Marciano. So I was almost immediately getting that sort of feeling back of, if only we'd just got that early goal, it would have set the tone. And the way we were set up compared to Hibs, I think were, giving us a bit more respect than maybe that we've maybe earned through our last couple of derby performances, but also that Hearts seem to have that impetus to go ahead and attack. Yesterday, I felt as if we'd got that early goal, Hibs would have had to have almost rethink their selection straight away. So there was a bit of me that was thinking, oh God, are we going to rue that chance? And it was unfortunate for Naismith. I think he lost his bearings once he went round Marciano, and he felt he was probably more central to the goal than he actually was, and all he had to do was pretty much just squaff it straight. But it was a great move, as you mentioned there. It was a great build-up involving 4 or 5 players, but I felt as if the first sort of 10-15 minutes we did actually start the game fairly brightly, and as we'll probably touch on, not only through my conversation but Craig's later, Hibs did actually come into the game more and more as the first half wore on.
Indeed, they did, and I have to say, again, we spoke at half-time, the group of us, Hearts and Hibs fans, and actually, probably more so than any game that we've spoken about before, we were very much singing from the same hymn sheet. And having watched the game back today, I have to say, that first half is one of the most even halves of football I've ever encountered. There is the gilt-edged chance for Martin Boyle, there's Naismith's chance, and there was a break for Isma Gonçalves in behind as well, where there was a potential handball, probably very, very borderline, and then he arguably should have done better with a left foot shot on the swivel. So Hearts maybe just edged the chances, but Hibs had the more gilt-edged of them. I thought Hibs slightly edged possession for the half. I think if you look at the statistics, Hibs had slightly more of the ball, but I would say Hearts probably had more of the ball in dangerous areas of the pitch and looked a wee bit more threatening when they broke than Hibs did in the first half. What was your feel generally at half-time?
Really just echo those sentiments. I think it was a fairly even game, and you're right in making that point. I think Hibs seen enough of the ball to allow themselves to maybe influence the game a bit more, but the problem Hibs were having was McGinn and McGeoch were incredibly deep when retrieving the ball. I felt like when Hearts, particularly with Cochrane and Naismith and Milinkovic, who was kind of flitting in and out the game at stages, we seemed to get the ball to our feet in more advanced positions. Hibs never seemed to be able to get the ball to stick to Shaw. It was a huge ask for Ollie Shaw yesterday. He's made an impact, and I definitely don't think you could argue the case for starting him. Whether you could argue the case for starting him as a lone front man is maybe another matter, but I felt that Hibs were always going to find it difficult to make the ball stick up there. So although they had more of the ball, I felt that we were probably getting the ball into more interesting areas on the park and into that final third. Mitchell, out of all the 4 sort of wing-backs, was probably the one advancing forward and seeing more of the ball. Again, Stevenson was actually getting up and down the park fairly well, but unfortunately the outball to him just wasn't as good as it has been in previous derbies.
So while the scoreline was at stalemate right up until sort of the 86th minute in the game, I did feel that in terms of the pattern of play and the way the game actually progressed, halftime was probably the biggest shift in the momentum for either side, and that I thought the period of the sort of longest spell of dominance for either side was Hearts straight after half time for the first 15-20 minutes of the second half, where it did really seem like they hemmed Hibs in and they fashioned a few decent chances and potentially, I think half the ground thought one of them was actually in the net. Before we actually touch on those chances and what Hearts did there, what do you think happened at half time? Was it something that Craig Levein said in terms of motivation? Was there a slight tweak to the system that you could spot? Why did the momentum shift so drastically from a game that had been incredibly 50-50 to a game that for 15 or 20 minutes Hearts were the dominant side?
I don't think it needed to be anything tactical. I think it was probably just the fact that Craig Levein maybe had to press on the importance of us getting that victory yesterday. And I think Neil Lennon at half-time would have been the happier of the two coaches, given that it was all about game management. He probably felt, I'll contain Hearts, and then we've got options on the bench with pace and movement that could potentially nick a win for us in the last 15 or 20 minutes. So really, there's been a lot made about, the fact that Hibs certainly, probably compared to recent years, maybe didn't quite turn up for the game, but they weren't far off seeing that game plan through. It all hinges on those couple of minutes there towards the end of the match that we'll touch on with regards to the Boyle chance and then the Hearts goal. But I think the change was probably just due to the fact that Hearts sense that they really needed to show more drive and, get the game by the scruff of the neck. Whereas I think Hibs were maybe a bit over casual and complacent, but I think they probably felt that they were comfortable to an extent and were able to probably see it through until they made those tactical changes in the final sort of quarter of the game.
Okay, so let's start to touch on personnel in more detail then as we sort of reach the business end of the game. That the shot that I was referring to that half the ground thought was in was from Dimitri Mitchell, an unbelievable left foot volley that Marciano made, an equally unbelievable save from. Like I said, I think even those who knew it was a save still took a second or two to actually register what had just happened. What was your thoughts on that moment, and generally, as I say, focusing in on individuals, how did you feel Dimitri Mitchell fared in his first exposure to proper competitive non-end of season football?
I don't sit that far away from you, so from where we were sitting, we had a great view of the shot.
Yep.
But I thought that he'd hit it. He connected so well with the shot that even if Marciano got the hand to it, which you knew straight away he had, that it was still going to go in the net.
Yeah, you just waited for him to tip it into the inside of the net.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought, he's got the touch, but so I actually jumped up. And it took me a couple of seconds to register that it hadn't actually went in, which shows you just, it was a superb save. A lot of keepers would have managed to have got to that because it was at their near post, basically. But to actually get enough strength in his wrist to keep that diverted from going behind him and into the net, it was a superb save.
I think the hand was so strong that a lot of people thought it hit the post.
Yeah,
I think that's how strong the save was, that people thought it had hit the base of the post because it rebounded out with that velocity, that seemed a more likely option. In terms of Mitchell's actual influence on the game then, what were your thoughts on how he impacted a game that, in theory, Craig Levein would have been... In theory, Craig Levein would have been well justified to be quite worried about the laddie maybe being overawed by the occasion. How did you feel he fared?
Yeah, I have to admit, playing the game at Tynecastle was always going to suit us in terms of trying to bed Mitchell in. When you consider how well Hibs played at Easter Road a couple of months ago, where they went very direct and they had the two wide men and they were able to use that extra width that Easter Road gives you, that would have been a far more different, more difficult match to have probably sort of tried to give a player his sort of debut, so to speak. But what impressed me most about Mitchell yesterday was the fact that for a guy who's recently been converted from a winger into a left back, he does the basics very well, and he doesn't. It wasn't a case of him just getting his head down and running and trying to hit the byline. When he thought that he couldn't beat his man, he would just play the simple pass back, or he would try and look for a 1-2, and that sort of decision making probably impressed me more than anything he'd done that looked dynamic or sort of quick-paced. I just liked the fact that he seemed to do the simple things right. He seemed to be taking instruction well from whether it was Berra or Naismith or whoever he was trying to link up with. And he looked as if he'd been playing alongside some of those players a lot longer than, maybe a week's worth of training sessions. That was the most sort of key thing for me. It was the fact that alongside of the balance that he brought to the rest of the team was so impressive.
Yeah, agreed. So from that moment on, the game, I don't know if it ever went back to 50-50, but it did sort of swing back and forth between the two clubs from that moment. Just when you thought Hearts maybe had a handle on it because they couldn't break the deadlock, they then started to maybe show signs of fatigue or frustration, and Hibs got back in it and showed their threat on the counter-attack, and obviously Boyle drew a fantastic save out of John McLaughlin later on, just prior to Hearts opening the scoring. Before we touch on Hearts opening the scoring, we've given Marciano a lot of praise there, even as Jambos. Let's talk a wee bit about the Hearts goalkeeper. How important is it to have someone who, at this moment in time, it feels like everyone has confidence in, when you look at the times that Hearts were really struggling under Ian Cathro? One of the big concerns was that it seemed like Hearts could concede from anywhere because the backline was so shaky and Jack Hamilton was just very inconsistent. How much of a difference has it made having McLaughlin there, who, even when you're dominating and a shot maybe comes out of nowhere, he's got the concentration and the mentality and the professionalism to make sure he's going to be there to do everything he can to keep the ball out?
It's a mix of all those elements, isn't it? So not one element on its own can justify the fact that we've had 7 clean sheets in a row. You take Craig Levein, you take his record as a player and as a manager. You then add in Christophe Berra coming back, John Souttar recovering for his injury, and then you bring in John McLaughlin, who quite clearly is a very capable goalkeeper at this level. If you tried fixing Cathro with 2 of those elements, or Hamilton, I think we'd still have problems. So it's a mix of all 3 of those things all sort of coming together at once. But yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the things that Hearts fans are now keen to see us, carry out in terms of contract work or transfer news over the next couple of weeks is to try and tie McLaughlin down on a longer term deal. He's definitely a steadier influence, very comfortable with his ball at his feet. Yeah, he shanks a couple like most keepers do, but yeah, generally speaking, he's always very quick to try and release the ball as well from his hands, so he's always looking to see if there's anyone available to take that ball in. So definitely, even in terms of that, you've seen massive strides, and that naturally then breeds confidence in the back 4 in front of him. John Souttar looks a far different player this season because he's got people that he can rely on playing either to the side of him or behind him as well.
You mentioned the captain there then, so let's segue on to him. Christophe Berra, generally speaking, I think over the last 24 hours has had as many plaudits as I've ever seen for a Hearts player, really. I think he was referred to on Sports Scene last night as the best defender in the country. I think there's been a lot of people coming around to the idea that he's probably the best bit of business any Scottish team did this summer, at least in terms of value for money. And he played a huge, huge part in what initially a lot of people in Tynecastle thought was actually his winner yesterday. Generally, give me your thoughts first, generally, on Christophe Berra and how big an impact he's made, particularly over the last run, since Levein's become manager and over the sort of 7 clean sheets. But also, if you can, give me a wee bit about how his influence manifests itself in situations like that when Hearts need someone to step up. They need a hero, because this is slowly dragging towards yet another game to the undefeated streak and another game where Hearts could kick themselves and think we've cost ourselves there, because now we're going to Easter Road and we're underdogs there.
There was a lot of talk prior to Christophe returning, generally from people who were only sort of exposed to him at international level about, he's not going to make much of an impact. He's not a great centre-half. We've got better options for centre-half. And I think the point I kept on trying to make, and I saw a lot of people trying to do this in his defence, was at our level, at Scottish Premiership level, he would be a very capable centre-half signing and would represent probably the best bit of business that any club could make out with the Celtic probably this season. I think it's taken a little while for people to come round to our way of thinking, and there's still the same jibes about, his clearances and his ability on the ball. He defends first and foremost, and that's basically his job. If we want somebody to bring the ball out for the back, we've got John Souttar for that. So, in essence, he does what he's there to do, which is lead the team and lead from the back. And if you see his contribution for the goal, basically from the clearance at that corner kick, all the way up to how he gets himself to that corner kick from Cochrane, that just epitomised what Christophe Berra has been for us. Probably really since Craig Levein came in. I thought, and I did highlight this at the time, I felt that in the League Cup games, he looked a bit lost and he looked a bit shell-shocked, and that could possibly be because he was experiencing what was happening behind the scenes that none of the fans were really privy to. But since Craig Levein came in and John Daly sort of took over temporarily, he has been a colossus. It sounds as if we're over egging that fact and we're milking it a little bit, but he's been superb. I mean, unless he has a severe, breakdown in form between now and the end of the season, you would think he has to be at least in contention for discussion amongst Player of the Year nominations. Okay,
so that moment where the ball hits the back of the net, or doesn't, because it's a weird feeling when you score such an important goal and the ball doesn't hit the back of the net, and you're not quite sure for a second. You feel like you saw it go over, but we saw a perfect example about 4 weeks ago where a lot of people felt like they saw it go over, but it wasn't a goal. What was your reaction like when the scramble happens? Could you see that it was a goal straight away? How quickly did you register that Hearts had just got themselves a hugely important winner?
I had my eyes on the referee the whole time, and I did not commit until I saw the referee starting to make his way back up to the halfway line. It was strange. You could see even the players looked like they struggled to know how to celebrate it, because, like you say, you don't see the ball hitting the back of the net. You're not quite sure what to do. So even the players at first, it's kind of like a claim, and then they all just end up just jumping all over each other because they don't know what to do, given the timing of the goal as well. I guess for the fans it was a little bit easier to kind of show your feelings and kind of give it tight to the away support. But yeah, I mean, from where we sit in the main stand, you were never going to be able to tell whether that had crossed the line until you saw the TV replays later on in the evening. So it was more just the relief of seeing the referee give it, and then notice, the bench celebrating and all the people round about you jumping up and down as well.
On a personal level, how nervous were you for the 5 or 6 minutes that were remaining? Was it a typical sort of right on the edge of your seat, this is going to be the Alamo here to hold on, or were you actually, based on the clean sheet record, quite confident? I'm interested to see, as a fan, did the emotions take over, or were you able to actually say, well, we've not conceded in the last 6 3/4 games, why would we concede now?
I was more nervous for the 5 or 6 minutes leading up to the goal than I was after. I felt that Hibs had probably their best spell in the second half, just leading up to the goal. They'd brought on Barker, and although, Barker was very much all style and no substance, as I think he has been since he signed for Hibs, he does give them another option, and so does Murray. And I felt like they were starting to flood the final part, front of the gate park, and no matter how it didn't look like it was clicking for them, if you throw enough players in there, it can sometimes cause a bit of chaos, and it can confuse the opposition team into making a silly little error. So there was that spell where you thought, they're getting into it, and then naturally, Boyle had that, I wouldn't call it a chance, he had a great effort that McLaughlin saved very well. So I was probably more panic-stricken at that stage. Once we got the goal, you do get that feeling sometimes of, it's our day. You get a scrappy goal like that, you're going to see it through, you're not going to concede. So I actually wasn't naturally you would rather that the board doesn't show 4 minutes injury time, but I wasn't that worried.
Okay, let's try and quick fire some personnel then. Finishing with, I think, the guy who gave us quite a lot of talking points after the game as well as during them, John Souttar. Just 30 seconds or so on less on yesterday and more on the player that he's become. He's mentioned himself that he feels he's bulked up a wee bit over the last few months, and that he's a bit more capable of dealing with the physical side of the game. What are you seeing from him in terms of his development?
I think it's the way in which he's using that physicality. I think he actually bulked up fairly quickly after joining Hearts. But the problem was the fact that he wasn't really using it to his advantage. Now, whether that's something he's picking up from playing alongside Berra and Hughes or watching how they train, he definitely looks like he's moved up a couple of gears in that respect. And he's actually putting his body in front of things, and he's knocking players out the way. Now, obviously, he deserved to be booked for that challenge on Bartley yesterday. Absolutely. But even that side of the game from him, that rash and impetuous side, you weren't really seeing a lot of that out of him either, when he was just this ball-playing centre-half that was signed from United.
He was seen as being soft, I think.
Yeah, I think definitely he was seen to be a bit of a soft touch. So, look, I'm not condoning, injuring opposition players, but it's a bit of a nasty streak to the game that I think he was needing to get to play at specifically at this level, at a higher level as well. So he is looking more and more now like a guy that we can make profit from. I was a little bit wary about him when we first signed him, that this was going to be his ceiling and that was going to be him as a footballer. But I've seen enough out of him over the last 6 or 7 months to suggest he still needs to do it consistently over a 12 or 18 month spell, but I'm seeing signs that he will get there.
Okay. Right, we need to be slightly quicker on these other personnel, because I'm conscious we're forcing Craig to sit through all this before he phones in.
I know, it's going to be suicidal.
Yeah, it might be. Well, you never know, he might be a bit more philosophical, but we'll see. Right, I would suggest that I've been sort of on this bandwagon for about 6 to 8 weeks now, maybe, but I think now, I never thought it would happen, but it's actually starting to get a wee bit of groundswell of attention now. I think Conor Randall has the real makings of a Jambo cult hero. I think he's everything that Hearts fans love to watch, and his sheer effort and dogged determination all of the time. He doesn't know what a lost cause is. What are your thoughts on Randall? Do you think that if Hearts could do something with Liverpool, they've maybe got a right back for the future there?
Just feel like we've just taken a bit of Alan Maybury's DNA and just grown it in a flower box for 6 months. I mean, naturally, Cathro brought him in to play as a central midfielder, and although I think we said that he was positionally okay in that position, he never really offered us much in terms of speciality defensive midfielder or moving forward. Second, right back certainly looks to be his role. I felt that he's had his best performances there. If you look at Aberdeen at Murrayfield, or like you say, the last 6 or 8 weeks, he's been superb there. And like you say, hopefully it is something that we can, work a deal on when the summer comes round. That would give us Brandon Smith and Randall all as options. So hopefully we can keep him.
Okay, a couple of maybe the more questionable names then, just before we finish on a couple of positives, I think. Arnaud Djoum and Isma Gonçalves, let's put them together because they're both guys who get a wee bit criticism at times. I think more so for their mentality than their talent. I think everyone realises that they're very, very talented football players and can be match winners for Hearts. But there's times, I've seen a couple of times in the last week or so, people have mentioned Djoum's inclusion and said, well, as long as it doesn't show the heart of a mouse, which seems to be a phrase that's used to describe Djoum sometimes. Isma Gonçalves, I think we all know, can be frustrating at the best of times. Some, I think, thought they sort of carried on that theme yesterday. Does Djoum deserve a wee bit slack in the fact that Hearts are notoriously short in the centre midfield at the moment, and there was a wee bit of a feeling that he's maybe rushed back from injury to give them an extra option in this game?
Yeah, I think both deserve great credit for the way they stuck at it yesterday, because it wasn't a game that was suited for their, the positives in their game. So I felt that what they did, they brought more than enough to the team to make sure that we defended well from the front back the way. I thought Goncalves put a shift in, and I thought that Djoum, actually, I've heard this a lot from people. I think it's because Djoum's sort of almost lethargic style when he's got the ball at his feet. He does almost move like he's in slow motion, and I think people sometimes watch him with the ball at his feet and think that transfers over onto his work rate, but he works very hard in every game I see him in. I don't see the same Djoum that other people do.
No, I'm the same, and I thought the positive side of his game yesterday was the defending.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, central midfield's not been a great position for us for well over a year now. We've struggled to fit other players in there, and that's naturally going to brush off on him at one stage. So I think, a lot of it has been overblown. I think people have jumped all over this African Nations Cup thing, and have given him an ego that I don't think is self-inflated. I don't think he shows any sort of ego at all, either on or off the park. And I hope that success that he now has in a maroon jersey and a derby can now sort of get a bit of the doubters off his back, and hopefully it can then sort of spur them on to sort of, see the positives in his game, which definitely outweigh the negatives.
Right, we'll leave Naismith till the 1 minute sort of transfer chat we'll have at the end of this, and there's a couple of people I've sort of left out because they were sort of 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 performers, not a huge amount to say there, but Harry Cochrane, it seems like he's a focus every week. It feels like he's going to be a focus every week because he's starred in a couple of games that have been televised now. Everyone is fixated by the fact that he's 16 and it wasn't just a one-off against Celtic. He's actually seems to be, we mentioned before, Sean mentioned at the start of the season on Twitter, I think he put a little sort of post up there saying, can he establish himself as a first team player? And everyone balked it and said, are you off your head? He's now actually doing that, Scott. What are your thoughts on how Cochrane's been performing, and in particular how he coped with a derby yesterday?
I feel like everyone's almost got a responsibility to try and play everything down, which sounds like you're being a bit of a killjoy, but the fact that he's 16, you almost feel like, my God, people, he could burn out when he's 18, he could burn out when he's 17 or 19. There's the club, the player, his family, and it all sounds great so far. You read articles he's done where he discusses about the influence that his dad has on his career, and anyone who's had any dealings with him says that he's very level-headed. But this is going to be a huge project for Hearts to try and play it down now. Because you're mentioning, he seems to flourish these big games. Two of his best performances now for Hearts have been those Celtic and Hibs matches, and it's going to be all about now trying to temper those expectations, and the fans need to try and learn that, because he is going to hit a sticky patch. You're seeing it now, albeit on a bigger level, but you look at Dele Alli just now for Spurs, and my God, all it takes is one poor month, and people almost forget about the previous 2 or 3 years where he was a sensation, and the next coming, and everything like that. So he was great yesterday. Again, what impresses me more is the way in which he makes the correct decisions. Very rarely does he lose the ball. He always has his head up and is looking forward. He can play a one-touch pass forward better than most of our other central midfielders can. And he just has that extra bit of class that a lot of our other players in that position don't have. And that's where he shines for me. But also his work rate was great yesterday. Bartley's a really imposing character and has had the major bulky, winning those 50-50 battles in the last couple of years. So it was great to see him maybe not match him, but at least look like he wasn't overawed by the fact he was up against Bartley and McGinn or McGeoch.
I think you're right in terms of keeping, firstly, Harry Cochrane in check, but also the media speculation that will no doubt now kick off when he's 16 and a half, whereas with some players at least you get till 21, 22, he's going to start being linked to other teams, and it's all going to grow arms and legs right off the bat. But I have to say, even on this show we mentioned a couple of months ago, I think, that it was difficult for Cochrane because it seemed like he was really having to learn some fundamental things at the highest level, like where on the pitch you can play football, when you need to just get rid of the thing. I think the thing that's impressed me most, well, more so than his technique and his character and everything, is just the speed at which he seems to be learning. That is normally an indicator of someone who can potentially become top class. That's a guy. We're going to speak about Stephen A. Smith in a bit, but I think with players like him who actually reach a very, very good level, what you see with them is the ability to go into a situation where people actually question, I don't know if he's up to that, and they adapt and they improve their game and they alter their game. And I do think literally over the space of 3 months we've seen a 16-year-old change his game in loads of ways already, and I think that's really exciting from a Hearts supporter's perspective. One random wee thing on Harry Cochrane as well, because it's, as I say, there's no shortage of plaudits come his way, but I've never heard anyone else say, at least I've not heard anyone else say in reference to yesterday's game, never have I seen a player, maybe since Mark de Vries in the 5-1 game, never have I seen a player manage fatigue better than Harry Cochrane does. I thought he was gone from about the 65th minute. In that he went down with cramp a couple of times, very similar to the Celtic game where you could see he actually alters his stride pattern. It becomes more of a shuffle and less of a sprint because he just clearly can't overstretch because he's worried about tearing the hamstring. But actually, he managed to get through to like the 93rd minute. With cramp for about the last 20 minutes. For a 16-year-old, that just strikes me as incredible, Scott. What were your thoughts on that? There was a couple of races that he got into with Bartley and things where he got absolutely done for pace and you thought, take him off. And then actually the next couple of minutes he's picking up the ball again, he's playing passes, and he seems free of the cramp that was there 2 minutes before.
I have to admit, it's not a part of the game that I've actually noticed in terms of that sort of change in his stride pattern. I would say I've noticed the sort of cramp thing, and it's not the first time that's kind of entered into his game. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm going to have to look up for now.
It's maybe not as pronounced as I'm saying, but it just seems like, early in the game he'll sprint, he'll break out, and he'll get involved in the game loads. And actually, as it goes on, you do see sort of, yourself, if you feel that feeling of cramp, you sort of, your strides become shorter, and you keep, because you don't want to overstretch, because that's when it's going to go, or you're going to get really bad cramp again. And it does seem like he sort of alters it, and yet his influence in the game doesn't disappear, which I think that's something that guys like Neil Lennon had, where Lennon was never fast, and he was never, he never really suffered from fatigue because actually he didn't cover that much ground. He just patrolled a small area of the ground, but always had an influence on the game. And if Cochrane's learning that already, then that stands him in really good stead, because it already means even if he doesn't grow to be that fast, even if he's not Gareth Bale in terms of the athlete stakes, he can still build a very good career as a centre midfielder who just keeps the ball ticking over and doesn't necessarily have to be a physical specimen to use the qualities that he has. I think those are the wee things that I'm seeing that do sort of make you really excited for Cochrane going forward. Right, let's do, I think we've covered everything with the game that we need to cover. Let's do a wee bit with Levine, because he very quickly ended his role as sort of Hearts manager for the day after the game and became the prime wind-up merchant of Tynecastle. What were your thoughts on his post-match comments and the reaction that they've generated from Neil Lennon?
Firstly, I think Peter Houston had faxed that interview over to him. It was almost like he was just taking that chief role over from Peter now that he's no longer at Falkirk and able to wind up Hibs fans. I think if I can discuss both Levine and Lennon, just very briefly, it was another one of those examples of managers having to come out and compose themselves after experiencing that sort of end to a cup derby game. So you had the positive of Levine where, I think there could be an argument to say that he took the fandom too seriously and he kind of forgot about his role as manager and spokesperson for the club. But I think most of it was in jest. And then you had the Lennon side where some fans would maybe say that, there was the irony of him not maybe knowing what humility meant because of what he said shortly after, claiming that Craig Levine didn't show it. But I think if you were to pull up both of the individuals 4 hours later, you probably get a completely different sort of post-match conference out of them. I think that in itself was almost just as vital for Levine to get people on side as what the result itself was. And I think that probably just showed that he's been, maybe bottling up what he's wanted to say for quite a bit now. But there's nothing majorly wrong with everything he came out with. Everyone could bring out facts and discuss and, bore us all to tears about this natural order of things and whether there's any sort of validity to that. But to be honest, I just think it was tongue-in-cheek. And I think that him and Neil Lennon probably have quite a good relationship from what I've been told by people who know them within the game. So I'm sure, again, if you're to rewind the clocks back and then asked them again 2 hours down the line how they felt about it, you probably would have got something more measured from both of them. But because it's 5 minutes after the game, emotions are always running high.
Do you think there is a feeling, even with Craig Levine himself, that he knows that there's been a lot of criticism amongst the support, and he knows that there's been questions even of his motives and his involvement as director of football and whether actually it was about love of the club or whether it was purely about carving up a job for life for himself? It feels to me, some of it I think is pure, genuine passion showing through, and other aspects of it do feel a wee bit stage managed to show that passion. With things like Martin Boyle, the altercation on the touchline, things like that, it does feel like he is he's making a point of showing how committed he is and how much it means to him as a person. In terms of the end result of that, do you feel it's working? Do you feel that is what's required and that Craig Levine is actually going to be much more firmly established as a Hearts manager who unites the support a wee bit more than he did 2 or 3 months ago based on this behaviour?
I think he's been bit by the bug, going back into management. I felt the first month or two he looked a little bit, looked as if he could have been, whistling strangers in paradise. He just didn't look as if he wanted to be there. Like it was a bit of a new thing for him. That adjustment's taken a little bit of time. Naturally, positive results helped that process for him. And again, like you say, there might have been a bit of what he said or how he altercated with Boyle during the game as a little bit stage managed. He's probably seen how, for all of Robbie Nielsen's achievements in the short time he was Hearts manager, people will always bring up the fact that he was quite a dry character. He wasn't one for always displaying emotion after games. Ian Cathro definitely had that sort of labelled at him. That was one of his weaknesses, the fact that he couldn't really convey how he felt about things, before, during, after games. So he's probably watched that from his position and thought, I'm not going to allow myself to get any sort of that kind of criticism fired back at me. So even if things are going well in terms of results, I'm going to make sure, because again, that can sometimes mask poor performances. And Neil Lennon's quite good at that. Neil Lennon's quite good at deflecting away from the performance and judging him and putting the focus on something else. Mourinho does it. Alex Ferguson did it. A lot of great managers do it. And I think Levine's just learned that, you know what, I look back at some of the most famous and most popular Hearts managers over the last 10, 15 years. Xabi Alonso, a lot of that was down to his character and how he brought himself across to the fans away from the park. And if Craig Levein can master that a little bit, some people will maybe say, well, it's disrespectful in that, but ultimately his employers won't mind, and we are his employers at the end of the day. We pay Craig Levein to be our manager, you know? So we are in effect the customers, and he will only be worried about pleasing us and pleasing Anne Budge. So if he keeps doing that, then why stop it?
Okay, perfectly segueing on from us as customers and people who pay wages at the club. Stephen A. Smith's one of the people that we've left out. Now, I didn't really want to talk about his influence too much in yesterday's game because it was made clear by everyone that he was again essentially hurried back to fill a gap up front for Hearts, and that he hadn't played any sort of competitive game since August. He had barely played under 23 football down south. I think he had a bit of an influence on the game. He had a couple of really nice interchanges with certain players, but I don't think anyone can draw too much about what influence he's going to have at Hearts from that one performance. Speculating on that front though, what's your feeling on Stephen A. Smith, the fact that Hearts managed to secure him, and the finances of the deal in particular? Because I know that that's come under question by a lot of people about how are Hearts affording this, and does it represent value for money? What is your feeling generally on Hearts bringing in Stephen A. Smith?
Well, firstly, to knock all the rumours on the head about the deal itself, I mean, it's quite clear that we're using the money generated by the Walker sale, and that Stephen A. Smith is sort of subsiding a bit of that wage himself. So whether Norwich are paying 40 grand and we're paying 6 and he's wavering 4, or he's wavering 6 and we're paying 4, I'm not too sure about the specifics of that, but it's definitely a manageable deal for what you're talking about. Is what, about a 4 or 5 month deal at the most?
Yeah.
In terms of his influence off the park, I don't think there's one person in the game that's got a bad word to say about him. You look at how, fans of previous clubs have taken him, albeit away from the Rangers thing, which is more to do with the way he left the club rather than anything he'd done whilst he was there. It's always generally positive. Yesterday, what I liked about Stephen A. Smith, and you knew he had this in his locker, because this is one of the reasons why some fans didn't look on him too fondly when he was playing for other clubs. He's always at the referee. He's always nipping it. You could see that he was just reminding the referee, probably about McGinn, or that's his second, or that's his third, or that's his fourth. We've lacked a lot of those players up until very recently. But with Berra, Lafferty, Cowie, Michael Smith, those types of guys, we now have that sort of streetwise team that you need to navigate derby matches, to navigate away trips to Hamilton, and those games where we were probably a bit too soft and a bit too easy to just roll over, and if we couldn't play football, we would just allow the teams to sort of physically overawe us. So for that side of things, I saw a great amount from Naismith yesterday.
Okay, I think the other thing on that is you could see a little bit yesterday as well, the influence that he's going to have on the young players. He never stopped talking to Harry Cochrane. He never stopped talking to Dimitri Mitchell. It was constant. Even more established pros in the Hearts team, he literally was taking the responsibility, it seemed at points, for organising the way we lined up from throw-ins and things like that. It was responsibility that someone who joined us on Thursday would not normally be expected to take on. But I think things like that are indicative of what he can bring, even if he's not rattling in the goals as he failed to do yesterday. Final point then, Scott, based on Craig Levein's after-match comments, he mentioned in terms of the rest of the transfer business and the rest of the transfer window that he's still looking for 2. He's looking for a winger and a central midfielder. Now, the cynic in me says it's unlikely a manager says that on live TV unless they're fairly confident they're at least getting some of what they're talking about. Do you think it's likely that Hearts have got deals that they're working on to fill both of those positions?
I think they are. I think they've probably been working on all aspects of transfer activity since probably December, but some of it could bear on whether we can let certain other individuals go. So you look at Victor Norin, Christian Novak, Mallory Martin, maybe even somebody like Cole Stockton. You're looking at maybe 4 or 5 individuals that we're maybe saying, look, we really need to release a couple of them before we can afford to entertain bringing in X, Y or Z. So I'd imagine they're probably, for Craig Levein to come out and say that, they're probably 75% of the way there in terms of agreeing things with the incoming player. Again, it's all about trying to get similar deals to what they've just agreed there with Greslak last week.
Are you happy with those positions being the positions that are required in the Hearts squad, though?
Yes and no. I'm a little bit surprised that they're not potentially looking at centre-half if they're thinking of playing a free more often, but if they're not, then maybe they're fine with the way that is.
I had a similar thought. Do you think it's maybe because Conor Randall's so entrenched at right back now that they're looking at Michael Smith as being an additional centre-half?
Possibly. That could possibly be what they're looking at. And again, Daniel Bowers came in once or twice this season and has acquitted himself fairly well as well, so maybe they're looking at him. I suppose Blabin can fit in there if he's needed as well in certain games. So they maybe feel that they're comfortable there and that their priority is to inject a bit more pace and a bit more direct play from the wider areas. Obviously, Mitchell showed that he could bring that into our game. And then maybe, centre midfield, it's funny, it's trying to pick out what type of centre midfielder. Are we looking for someone to bring in for Walker? Or could Naismith maybe play there? So it's going to be interesting if they're maybe looking at an offensive type player, because although Cochrane and Doom you wouldn't say are defensive midfielders, they could probably play quite deep and then probably still contribute in a defensive way if they need to. So maybe it is more of an attacking minded player that they're looking at. So it's going to be, it's weird because as soon as we signed Naismith, I almost switched off from transfer activity. I felt as if I was happy with that. And now after seeing Mitchell, I feel as if I'm really happy with the way we went about our business now. So I guess everything now is kind of seen almost as a bit of a bonus between now and the end of January. Okay,
good. Scott, thanks very much for your time and for joining me. I mean, no too much, because you couldn't be bothered getting a bus to Trent. But other than that, thanks for being here, mate. In spirit, at least.
No problem. Good luck to Craig for handling the second part of the show.
Aye, so we're going to go a very quick ad break and we will come back with Craig Leach on the line to discuss Hibs. Thank you for staying tuned to Monday Night Football on Radio Saltaire.